Power Chord.
Hi, Power Core guys, kids, and whatever. Today we are online with a legend. I mean, for me, it's a legend because I'm used to be a bass player. So for me, it's an honor to introduce to you Joe Lally from Fugazi. Thank you, Joe, for your time. Really, we really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Joe, I would like to have a friendly talk with you because I grew up with Fugazi album, and I'm still following you with your solo projects and Mestatics. So I would like to understand your music path because you start with, let's say, with punk rock, hardcore, let's say so, and you walk through post rock or whatever, and now you're playing a sort of jazz. Looking back at your time in Fugazi, what do you think people understood about the band's philosophy and way of working?
Um, I think in Fugazi, I mean, I can only really talk about what it was like from inside the band. I can't comment too much on the way people perceived what we were doing, but I think people appreciated that we were pushing at the boundaries of the music we were making to understand what we could make I think people appreciated that we were challenging ourselves to
Yeah,
make something different, you could say,
yeah,
um, because we really didn't know. You don't know what you're doing when you're when you're trying to um, when you're trying to create something new, when you're trying to get into a new territory. Um,
you didn't
it,
have the perception to doing something seminal.
no, I mean, you just try to challenge yourself, and so that challenge is based on the sort of the limitations that everyone has about what they know, what they're capable of playing, and there was a communal desire to reach maybe into somewhere different. Everyone bringing the thing that they understood about music that they liked and the instrument that they were playing, you know. But you kind of put all those things together, and what happens is what happens. There's really no, you don't really understand how it's happening, but everyone is kind of pushing and pulling on the music in regards to their likes or dislikes, and you end up in a place, but there's a group effort of belief also in one another to do those things and trust in everyone else to arrive at a place that you can all agree upon. um, and that's based on sort of a communal belief in one another, and being a band is, I think, a lot of different things from the outside. There's people write in magazines, and there's the album cover, and you know there's like the look of the people physically when you go see people play and everything. But that's all part of um perceiving what it is. It's not everything that a band is. A band is always trying to get at, or at least this band was always trying to get at something that that was an expression based on what we received
Sure.
from all the music we loved, and it made us feel a certain way about our perception of the time that we were in, the reality that we were involved with, and you know, personally for me, it's music was the only understanding of this reality of our society. I just couldn't really understand other aspects of it. There was school and there was work, and there's the things that are presented to us to engage with society and humanity. And it's a very strange thing when you look at the world around you and you watch the news and countries, leaders of countries behaving the way they do. And
Yeah.
it's a very growing up during Reagan as president, put a very particular, I don't know, I don't want to use the word suicidal.
You can, you can.
I don't want to say, suicidal. I want to say a bleak outlook.
Yeah,
I had a very bad outlook on what my choices were.
yeah,
And I took a particular kind of a refuge in music and understanding what to do with music, and trying to be in a band had nothing to do with the overall picture of big rock bands and those things and success, monetary success. It was a very important escape into a world I could understand and engage with, which had nothing to do with normal society. I
yeah.
didn't care about having a house or having a job or getting a new car or, just any of those things about having possessions and those things. They just, it was kind of a life and death thing about being in a band. It was just a choice to live. And I had a very, very good job that was paying me very good money. And they would have paid for my school, and they would have, in computers in the early 80s, that would have taken care of me for the rest of my life, to learn how to program computers. None of those things were of any interest to me because they all pointed toward a reality of moving through society in the normal channels that they didn't appeal to me.
Yeah. You talk about the music you loved. In Fugazi era, what was the music you loved?
Well, within the band, we were all getting to know what the music, each of us was, what music was important to each of us.
And what was your music?
Part of being in the band was getting to know that about everyone. I grew up listening to really all Black American music, and so funk and soul and R&B were a normal part of what I was listening to. Otis Redding and James Brown, Parliament Funkadelic, and Sly and Family Stone.
Yeah.
All of that stuff was really normal listening for me as I grew up. I didn't pick up the bass till I was 19. So by then I had explored a bit of classic rock in middle school, junior high school. And then was really hoping for something because that wasn't very satisfying. And punk rock was arriving just at the time I wanted something else to be happening. And so picking up the bass was because I could see how the bass functioned in music after listening to Joy Division and especially Public Image. I could just suddenly see the role of the instrument, and that moved through all the music I'd been listening to right back to James Brown and Otis Redding, like right back to the R&B that I didn't understand it like on paper, I couldn't have proved it, but I could see it, I could intuit how this instrument was used. And so I just went about writing songs with a friend, and that was really the way I always engaged with music, which is a very difficult path with your instrument if it's only based on what you're going to write with people, because you need to be writing with people all the time to be learning. Yeah. So there were periods of being in a band and then very long periods of not being in a band and not knowing what to do with the instrument, because that's what you do. You write with people. Sitting around playing by yourself meant almost nothing, So I didn't study. I didn't understand on that level. I just had the perception of what to do with the bass in music, given the opportunity. That came along with Ian. So I did a couple of short bands that played two shows each. And then there was, that was 1984 that stopped. 85, 86, like almost 2 years of not much. And then I start to play with Ian, and then we're playing together, writing music, but looking for a drummer because the first drummer doesn't stay. So there's just, at least I get back to writing with somebody, and it's building,
Yeah.
But then the first opportunity of what music does Ian listen to, right? That starts to become part of what you talk about,
Yeah.
the people that you play with. So it turns out that Ian worked in a record store, and then Brendan comes into the band, and he worked at the same record store, and then Guy comes into the band, and they all worked at the same record store. So they have an enormous opportunity to hear all of the music. The record store owner is going to England and bringing back music. There's a lot of English punk music. There's just a lot of music, period, that they are exposed to, right?
Cool.
And I have my limitations on what I was going to buy concerning like punk music or English punk music specifically. I only knew so much, and even punk music in the United States, it was what I bought, and it was what was different.
Yeah.
All of hardcore tends to have a lot of similarities, and then I was looking for the different things, like the Bad Brains or the Minutemen, the Dead Kennedys. They had like a specific thing, and then you'd have local hardcore that started to sound the same. But when it was local to you, it had a significance because you went and saw those bands play, and you saw those bands change,
Yeah.
make other bands, and all of those things. So the local punk scene was very interesting to me, but so was, the Live at the Def Club record that came out of San Francisco that was documenting that punk scene was very interesting to me because I didn't know about my own local scene at that time, 1979. I barely understood what was happening in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So because I was still in high school, I didn't spend a lot of time in the city, especially at night.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, being with the band was understanding that everyone, Ian liked all kinds of, classic rock that was like sort of hippie music, basically from Woodstock. The Woodstock record was a very influential record to him. And I had also gone through my period of trying to understand what I liked about classic rock. So we shared like the Jimi Hendrix, period of music and those kinds of things. But then so did, of course, some aspect of what Brendan or Guy liked, because they also understood parts of that, like the Beatles. And Guy was a big fan of Queen, and and really brought that into the band by making cassette tapes that we listened to in the band, like in the van traveling on tour. With a lot of time to listen.
So, I never thought about Queen.
Yeah, they're and I was basically, I had touched upon things about Queen that were really interesting, but to really take them in as album after album, I had never done that. So there was a lot of time to do that in the van. You have a lot of time. And that was very interesting because I was completely won over in the end, because they are masters of arrangement and things about songwriting, and just amazing singers. And, there's a lot of things that Fugazi sort of ingested as a band, musically, that people probably wouldn't necessarily understand.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just punk music, and it wasn't just classic, rock even. There's just all kinds of things that people enjoy. Brendan, even during the band, Brendan was listening to Arvo Part, was, at the time kind of a contemporary composer, classical composer.
Yeah.
There's just all these different things that people's just, have you heard this? Do you know about this? and everyone's listening to everything, So all those things. I started getting into free jazz during that band more. But Brendan's father, he saw Duke Ellington.
Oh, well.
The orchestra. You know what I mean? My father was in World War II. These things aren't impossible. It's just that they were of different, mindsets to go into different things. But his father was a big jazz fan, so Brendan was hearing jazz growing up.
Yeah. About
Power Core.